Good morning, everyone. We are now live with the session which got interrupted with our crash on the first day. So, as promised, we made it up for you and managed to get the speakers to join us today to host this very important panel of the conference, which involves Greece, Italy, and Malta. So without any further delays, I would like to give the virtual microphone to Joseph Borg, to start his panel. Thanks everyone for tuning in.
Thanks, Zoltan. So, hi everyone. Since our panel got interrupted, we decided to sort of start it off again from scratch. Basically, for those who have followed us for the first 20-25 minutes on Tuesday, there might be some repetition, but then we'll continue with the rest of the panel accordingly. For the benefit of those that have joined us today but weren't with us on Tuesday, I think it's better for completeness sake that we start it off from scratch. And like last Tuesday, I'd like to start with Yanica from the Malta Gaming Authority, who is one of the top tier regulators in Europe and who was one of the first regulatory authorities to actually regulate online gaming in the world, and one of the most experienced, of course. Over the past couple of years, Yanica, the MGA has upped its efforts in relation to enforcement and compliance. How important is it for a regulator to find the right balance between compliance and promoting innovation and competition, which ultimately also benefit the player and the user?
Good morning, Joe. Good morning, everyone. I'm happy to be here again. As you correctly stated, over the past few years, you have been placing a more increased focus on enforcement and compliance. And I would say that is quite a natural process for a regulator, especially one who's in his second wave of regulation, right? So once the industry would have grown to a certain amount, and once we were able to understand the challenges that it poses, once the industry matures further, at that point, it is expected that there is an increased shift towards enforcement and compliance, even so because the regulator is in a better position to understand the risks posed by the industry. But I wouldn't say that there is a huge conflict between innovation and compliance. I think that, as I would very much agree, that it also helps the player when there is a product that is innovative, when the service, the offer being offered by the gaming operator is developed, technologically developed further. And in fact, I would say that it is imperative that there is this innovation for a properly regulated market, and for two reasons. I recall mentioning this in the last time we met too. The two reasons would be that the most obvious is that an innovative product is in and of itself more attractive. And excuse me, it is a more attractive product would attract customers naturally, and innovation isn't unique to the regulated market. So we know that the unregulated market is also being innovative in its ways, and we want players to be attracted to the regulated market because that's where we know that there are the safeguards, and that's where we know that our objectives of keeping gambling free from crime and keeping players safe is actually being respected. So we want players to be attracted to a regulated market, and therefore it is important for us that that regulated market is innovative. But it is also important for us to see that that innovation also extends to the way that operator performs its compliance and meets its obligations, and therefore not only in just making the product more attractive and enticing consumers and inviting players over, but also being more compliant in itself. And to be fair, this is also something that we see. We see that the the measures and the mechanisms being adopted by operators in their compliance today are much more robust and much more advanced than they were in the past. We have seen operators spend more money and invest much more in technology that helps them be more compliant. Of course, I believe that there is still a long way to go. This second part of what I'm saying, innovation in compliance, arguably came much later than innovation in making a product more attractive, and therefore it's a much tougher hill to climb, I think. But we're getting there, and therefore I wouldn't say that there is this conflict between innovation and compliance from our point of view. And the MGA has always tried to support innovation and to invest in it, actually.
Okay, I totally agree with you, but however, the only thing that it is fair to say as well is that automatically regulatory restrictions do limit at least or delay innovation, because as you rightly said, the regulator needs to ensure that that innovation will result in benefits for the player over benefits for the operators. Ideally, it benefits both. Ideally, it benefits both plus the regulator, because as you said correctly, today we're seeing innovative products being used to increase compliance within the operators. So operators are using innovation, are using new technologies, are using AI, for example, in order to comply with various regulatory obligations. But it is also true that regulation limits or delays the entry of innovation in products that are regulated. Panagiotis, what is this increased attention from regulators? How is it affecting you as an operator, of course?
Yes. Hello to everybody. It doesn't affect us much. Of course, we need to be extra cautious when we do changes to make sure that we remain compliant. We need to become better in auditing internally compliance, so we ensure we are compliant before a regulator audits an operator. I wouldn't say it, and of course, as Yanica mentioned, we need to revert to more sophisticated ways of ensuring compliance. Compliance by Excel sheets is dead, simply. I would say that what blocks innovation is the opposite, is the lack of a regulatory framework that regulates certain verticals, certain types of games, certain payment methods. So that could block innovation. So what the operators seek is, to all the different types of games and all the different types of payments to be regulated, so we can invest and use them. I can give you a number of examples of excellent products that came out in the last year, and it took us 3 to 6 months to have them approved in certain jurisdictions. So the lack of a regulatory framework to go from production of something innovative to offering the new innovation commercially, this is the biggest blocker. In terms of compliance, those of us who are licensed operators, we welcome enforcement because it evens the odds with the offshores. So enforcement is more than welcome.
Rightly so, and I tend to agree with you. The lack of regulation, the lack of clarity, I would say, more than the lack of regulation, is one of the reasons why innovation is stifled and delayed. So an example would be you mentioned payment methods, the use of cryptocurrencies within by operators, by B2C operators. And it's a pity because there could be some really big advantages coupled with the use
Exactly.
of
This is the biggest example. This is the biggest example.
So totally. But we are seeing top tier regulators like Malta and the UK focusing a lot right now on player responsible gaming. Sorry. So there is, especially for example in the UK, the regulator decided to issue a ban on the use of credit cards. In Malta, there's a lot of effort being done in order to for operators to have mechanisms in place to realize who players that are at risk of becoming compulsive gamblers are noted by the operator and followed, and basically action should be taken at some point in time by the operator if they see that there are trends of compulsive gambling. The same happened in the UK as well. So we're seeing a lot of efforts from top tier regulators that usually are the precursor for all the other regulators to follow in terms of this. There's also a lot of increased enforcement and supervision efforts in relation to anti-money laundering. So we've seen massive fines being dished out by the British Gambling Commission a year or two ago, and we're seeing a number of fines being dished out, massive fines being dished out by the Maltese regulators. In the Maltese case, it's the anti-money laundering authorities, not the MGA, but all the visits are and compliance reviews are done jointly between the MGA and the anti-money laundering authority. So it's a joint effort. We're seeing a lot of these fines, very big fines, being dished out to operators. What are your views? How is this sustainable for the industry if all the regulators follow suit? Panagiotis or Yanica?
I can start. I can start. There are certain aspects of responsible gaming and AML compliance for which the operators have done even more than what the regulations require. So if we are talking about developing AI to identify a problematic player early enough to help him, this is something that most of the operators are already, they are on it, or offering cool-off periods, self-exclusion periods, a panic button in the site, or even designing the games in a way that they are not addictive. I think the operators are pretty much ahead. Those that go by the book and they are licensed operators in the countries they operate, but also I would say all big tier operators have proceeded very well in this area. The problem starts when you put restrictions such as €1 bet per spin. This to me is like sorry about that. It's like it's not the best way to deal with the issue. It's like having a tavern and saying we will serve wine in short glasses. Sorry about that. And so this is a problem, and since diverts people to offshore operators who don't have these restrictions.
Yanica, what's your?
I'm going to be.
Is the industry really ahead from what you see?
I'm going to be quite frank on this. The results of what we're seeing today in terms of regulations and these restrictive regulations are what I would say a result of what has happened with the industry in the past few years. The industry, and I won't single out operators, I would say all the industry didn't place enough focus on where it should have been placing focus. Predominantly in this case, we're talking about RG and AML. Perhaps we're still understanding the way the industry was growing, we're still understanding the way this industry works, but at this point, I believe that the industry has matured enough to be aware of these risks and to be aware of these issues that the industry faces. Unfortunately, we're at a point where the industry, the environment in which the industry is surviving is that where, to put it mildly, it doesn't enjoy a positive public opinion. And regulators, or rather legislators, legislate for the public, and therefore it is unfortunately expected that there is this element of restriction being placed. Also, the industry does not live in a bubble, and it lives within the rest of the world. And when the rest of the world is focusing on AML compliance and making sure that all industries are free from crime, it is of no surprise that the gaming industry is targeted as one of those industries that was in the past used as a vehicle for money laundering. And therefore, I don't think it should come as a surprise, neither the RG part nor the AML part. Are certain measures being too strict? Perhaps, but were they too loose? Also perhaps. So I think that the industry needs to understand that this is the situation today and that we need to get on with it, and the industry needs to step up and see what it can do. As I said before, there's plenty of technology and there's plenty of innovation. We are not seeing it being used enough in the compliance sphere. Of course, there are measures that are too restrictive, but that is the reality, and those are the parameters in which we have to work. And unless the industry starts putting its right step forward and putting up its own bar and setting its own standards, then of course, this is the situation we're going to remain faced with, and it doesn't favor anyone. I would agree that some restrictions would stifle innovation, but I guess that means that we need to be a bit more innovative and find a way around them in order to still produce a good product. And that is what needs to be seen, I think, by the world, and it is only when the public opinion itself can be improved, in my opinion. This is my personal opinion, but only when the public opinion can be improved that the legislators will take a different approach to this. And if we see, today we still see instances where operators do not take RG and AML seriously. Of course, they are dealt with in their own way, but that is why those fines are issued. It is unacceptable in October 2020 not to take RG and AML seriously. I think operators need to understand that it is also their responsibility that in order for the industry to be sustainable and to actually survive, they need to take these things seriously. So of course these fines have to be issued, and unfortunately we have seen many a time that it is only with fines that some operators would tend to react. So it is not a situation, I think, which anyone would really enjoy, but it is the situation today, quite frankly.
I think you put it really perfectly. It's a matter of perception. It's a matter of public opinion. I think the industry has, over the years, failed to speak as one and educate the people in general on the efforts it was making and on certain concerns that the public has about the industry, to basically educate the populations on what actually matters. That worries me a bit, because now we have a carpet bombing exercise, especially in Europe, compared to other areas in the world, especially on AML in particular. I'm seeing that we are becoming, there are 2-3 speeds around the world. So you have Europe, which is really clamping on anything that has to do with AML. You have the US, which is sort of in the middle. And then you have many other areas around the world that are lagging behind. And it is obviously, they are attracting certain industries to move into those areas which are much more lax from a regulatory perspective. So that worries me a bit. I believe that the effort should be more balanced from everyone in order to have a level playing field. Vasileios, I don't know if you have any comments on this particular topic before we move on to something else.
No, nothing specific. I just wanted to add that for Greece, the regulator Up to now, they did a good job. We have a new legislation, but I think that it is very important for the Greek Gambling Commission to have enough staff and competent staff to be able to regulate correctly the market and not create problems when a company, an operator, starts with a new innovative product that they need months and months to approve and don't have the skills to examine and approve correctly a new innovative product.
Okay. So, unfortunately, Domenico is not with us, but hopefully he'll be joining us later on during this panel, and I'll be able to ask him about the situation in Italy. But we have two Greek friends here, so, and Vasileios has already touched upon it, and I would like to understand what's the situation right now in Greece, how are things going with the new regulation, with the new framework, and also I'd like you to pick up again on what Panagiotis said and about the betting limits that have been set across the board, which in my opinion do not make sense. I have been fighting this all my career. You can't have the same betting limit for everyone because it might be too high for a certain strata of society, but it is certainly too low for other strata of society. So maybe the approach being adopted by the British Gambling Commission and the Maltese Gaming Authority, even though it's more onerous on operators, but is a better approach and a more equitable approach than having a one-size-fits-all limit across the board.
Okay, let me sum up again what we said last time about the situation now in Greece. I remind you that we were operating for 9 years with temporary licenses. We had one official offline license of OPAP, which used to be at that time the state lottery. Now it is privatized, but it still holds the monopoly of offline gambling. And we had an additional 24 temporary licenses that were operating for 9 years up until this year, where we are having finally a complete framework, a law that regulates online gambling. We have a new regulation and a new technical specification list for operators as of the 4th of August of this year. So what happened is that from the previous temporary licenses, out of the 24 licenses, the 14 of them renewed their operation. OPAP, the ex-state lottery, applied for an online license too, and we have two brand new licenses for two operators that will start operating in the next months. If you are asking me my opinion on the quality of this legal framework, I must tell you that it's quite good. It touches many aspects of betting and gambling in general, with one or two major disadvantages, like Panagiotis said, because what they need to do is balance the situation between OPAP, that is a monopoly in the offline gambling, and all the operators that operate online. It is an expensive license, I must tell you, and it's not only expensive on the fee you have to pay. The fee is 3 million euros for sports betting for 7 years and 2 million euros for all the casino games. So the total for a full operating activity is 5 million euros. And to this, you should add the application fee, which is 10,000, the letter of guarantee to the Greek government that you will pay your winners, which is another 500,000 euros. Then you have taxation, which is very heavy. We have a gaming tax of 35% on the GGR. And then of what is left after you have your net profits, you pay a 19% income tax, and to export your profits to your country of origin, you need an additional 5% on dividend tax. So this creates a lot of problems to the operators, and that's why we believe that we will not have too many newcomers in the market for these reasons of the high taxation, and of course because it's a saturated market with already 17 plus 1, 18 operators. The second reason, as Panagiotis said, is that there is this famous limit of 2 euros per spin that is implemented by the law. And this was done for a very simple reason, because they have given to OPAP the right to operate 35,000 slots inside the area of Greece, in specific areas and specific rooms that are called play OPAP. So there they have the same limit, so they could not allow the internet operators to operate more than 2 euros per spin, which creates the problems that Panagiotis said, that heavy gamblers will go to offshore companies and to companies that are not licensed. And this, as you know, cannot be easily controlled with the VPNs and all the other means, credit cards from banks in tax paradises, etc. So that's the situation right now. We are talking about a very important market that is being regulated. From what I see the statistics here, only the online operators had a GGR of 437 million euros last year. This is our estimation is that this year it will be 15% higher. And to this you should add 9 private casinos operating legally in Greece, horse racing operating by OPAP. You should add the lottery tickets operated by OPAP, and you should add the 35,000 slots operated also offline by OPAP. So it's a huge market that after all these years, we expect to have a good regulation and eliminate all illegal operators as good as it can get.
Very interesting, Vasileios. Very interesting. I'll go to Panagiotis, but I'll come back to you specifically on fantasy sports. But let's continue this discussion about the Greek regulation with Panagiotis. You're on mute, Panagiotis.
Yes. Well, first conclusion, I should have gone first. Vasilis said it all. So just to add, I agree 100%. It is exactly as Vasilis said. We expect a market of 16 to 18 operators by January. It is a the new regulatory framework is very well documented and explained. The process is clear. But it has all those, let's say, downsides Vasilis mentioned, such as I think it's the most expensive license in Europe. We have this limit in betting on RNG slots. There is also a limit there is a max win limit of 70,000 euros. This is also, it's a kind of, blocking the product. and we have to stop offering global jackpots. This is the only things I could add to what Vasileios said. He gave us the full picture. As we said the other day, the model is an authorization model, meaning that anybody who wants to apply and get a license, they can. The existing operators
how long does the licensing process take to get a license?
It's a different process for the existing operators and for the new. For the new operators, it's about the authority has 2 months to process your file and give an approval, and then there is 1 additional month for the go live. So it's a 3-month tops time interval. What I can add is that the Hellenic Gaming Commission, and I say this for non-Greek speakers, they speak English. They can because there are a lot of operators who would only speak their own language, and they provide every assistance. They are cooperating very well, and they provide a lot of assistance with the process. You can pick up the phone and ask anything you want. So this is the picture. On the good side, there is no limitations on, no restrictions on verticals. As it appears, it will be the case in Germany, where we will not be able to offer live casino and table games. There is no restrictions or requirement for an approval for certain leagues and markets, as is the case in Portugal, for example. So it's after you get the license, the whole process is smooth, and you can offer your products and innovate, having only these restrictions in the max bet for casino and the max and win and the global jackpots.
Very interesting. Thank you. And the 3 million that was mentioned for the sportsbook and the 2 million for the online casino have to be paid in advance?
4 installments.
Okay.
You can divide in 4 installments.
Over a number of years or within the same year?
I think it's over 2 years. Vasileios, if you...
Yeah. It's over 2 years. It's 4 installments. Initially, it was a down payment, but we asked, and they did this to help the small operators. Very good, very good.
And one last thing, out of again my curiosity. I'm assuming there are certain technical specifications. Are they very similar to other European regulatory frameworks, or?
They are almost identical to the Portuguese framework. It's an XML type of reporting method where there is a safe, you send the data, and the regulator access the data from there. And also, there are a lot of requirements in terms of security. You need to have your system certified, you need to have your company certified, certain certifications, security certifications for the people working in the security department of the operators. They are very strict on security and reporting.
Thank you. Very interesting.
It is not a UTP model, as Domenico said the other day, for Italy.
So, Vasileios, I promised you I'm going to tackle fantasy sports, and I'm very interested to understand. First of all, how is fantasy sports regulated in Greece? If it is as a standalone, or is it considered as sports betting? But before tackling that, I'd like you to tell me what happened. There was a big hype on fantasy sports 3-4 years ago from a regulatory perspective, because from an operational perspective, it is still very, very popular. But from a regulatory perspective, 3-4 years ago, it was one of the main topics being discussed in all conferences. And we've seen also the Maltese Gaming Authority coming up with an ad hoc framework. for fantasy sports, which was based on pool betting, but it contained very specific regulations, because it is considered in Malta as a skill game with a prize, and therefore there are certain rules that apply specifically for fantasy sports. But we haven't seen much happening after that. So Malta got its 3, 4, 5, 6 licensees, but I haven't seen a big drive following that in Malta or in any other jurisdiction in Europe, specifically on fantasy sports.
Okay, let me start with the very critical question. What is fantasy sports? Well, as you said, fantasy sports is definitely a skill game. You need to know a lot about the championship you are betting in, the players. You must study their performance in the last games.
Of the players at that time.
Yeah, you need to know the sport that you are dealing with. Okay. The second thing is that it must be definitely regulated. Why? Because although it is a skill game, there is gambling and betting involved in either way. If it's a pool game, you bet your bet on a pool and you get money back if you win. On the fixed odds version of that, it's definitely the same as a sportsbook. So it needs to be regulated. What happened in the past is that, as you very correctly said, some countries like Malta considered the game as a skill game, and they gave a skill game license of a specific class, and the UK Gambling Commission considered it as a sports betting product, and the only way they are differentiated is the way players are rewarded and paid. Greece is very interesting. In the new law, has incorporated fantasy as a sportsbook offering in the new online license regulation, and they had 5 categories of sports betting that are approved by this law and that operators can offer to their clients. And fantasy is paragraph number 2, very specifically described as a sports betting product. If you are dealing with a pool game, you know how it is done. You make your team, you get into a pool with 10 pounds, and then the winner takes the whole pool. What is interesting is the fixed odds fantasy, where the most typical way of betting is that you are betting under over if a player will get more or less points than the ones that the operator has fixed. So in Greece right now, we have the 2 major operators, OPAP and Stichiman, offering fantasy betting. Stichiman is offering mainly the pool game. OPAP is offering the fixed odds, and they up to now they are playing this under the regular fixed odds license, but in the near future they will play it with the new online license regulation. So we must, I think that Greece is the number 3 country in Europe that regulates efficiently the sports betting products.
Okay.
The fantasy sports betting.
Fantasy sports. Interesting. So my last question for today is a question. It's a topic that I know that is very much at heart of Yanica. I'll ask the question to Yanica, but I'm obviously happy to have anyone else butting in. We have noticed that the MGA, in particular, even more than any other regulatory authority in Europe, is placing a huge effort to combat match fixing. Can you tell us more on what you're doing, why you're doing it? I'll start by giving my opinion. I believe that match fixing is something that needs to be combated because it is going, if it is left, if we leave it, if we let it happen, we are risking losing the sports, which is very important for the gambling industry. But we have to always keep in mind that the biggest losers when there is match fixing, the victims when there is match fixing, apart from the fans, are the online gaming operators. And I believe that this has to be really explained to the public in general, that the biggest losers and the biggest victims after the fans are the online gaming operators. Yanica, please tell us what the MGA is doing on combating match fixing.
Sure. I couldn't agree more, first of all, that the biggest losers would be the fans and the operators, and of course the integrity of the sport itself. And in fact, very much as evidence of this is the fact that operators have been rushing to help us out in this and to make sure that we have a big role to play in combating match fixing. As until today, it is not an obligation for operators to report suspicious betting in relation to match fixing, but the truth is that many of them still do, and it will soon be an obligation. What we have done in anticipation of this was we have set up a dedicated unit to protect the integrity of sport, and this unit, headed by my colleague Antonio, has two roles. One would be informing the public as much as possible about the role of an operator and the role of a regulator when it comes to combating match fixing. And that in reality, although sports betting has been used as a vehicle and as a tool for match fixing, most of the time the operators too are victims of this. And what we've done is we've entered into agreements both with platforms and with sporting bodies in order to be a channel for information to pass through us. So we assist the police, we assist the sporting bodies, we assist regulators in other countries by sharing information on what could be a suspicious event for the purposes of match fixing. We have plenty of agreements so far with most of the large sporting bodies. We've even seen, unfortunately, when there was the COVID pandemic was at its beginning, at its beginning in Malta, but around March, April, we saw that was around that time most sporting events had been cancelled, for football most especially, and we saw all of a sudden a shift in match fixing in those areas that remained active. So those sports that were still being played. And so match fixing is very much a problem that is alive and a problem that we need to tackle. And I believe that it should be placed high on the agenda of most operators because it does not help the public perception either, to continue with the discussion we were having earlier. But we are seeing lots of support from most operators. I can count them on one hand, the instances where we didn't get cooperative feedback from operators, and that was dealt with accordingly. But we have solidified our place in this network of information, and even though there may have been obstacles, such as, for example, the GDPR, which was initially considered to be an obstacle, we have found that in reality it was not an obstacle. We were still very much able to share our data. We have a very good legal reason to do so, and we do so, as long as, of course, the rights of every individual involved are respected. So thankfully, we have built this network, and we will continue building on it further as we go along. And we have lots of work being done, and I wish we could have the opportunity to have perhaps another discussion where I can also invite my colleague to show you evidence of the work being done in this front.
If I may join you in this appeal, I really appeal to operators to participate in this, because this is a way to show the public that I hear it so much from football fans. I'm a big football fan myself. And I hear it so much, this is all because of the betting companies. No, we're actually seeing and noticing match fixing thanks to the betting companies. In the past, it used to happen, but because the betting companies were not so sophisticated, organized, and didn't monitor the situation as much as they do today, it wouldn't be picked up. Nowadays, the betting companies are picking them up, and that's why we're seeing more, not because there are more betting companies. And this message has to go to the public. I believe the public has, and the authority is doing a great job on this. And I also believe that now it's the turn of the operators to join this effort and make sure that the public is informed about this. I don't know if Panagiotis or Vasileios want to comment about this in short, if you don't mind.
Okay, I agree 100% with Yanica. Everything she said is spot on. I also see a lot of initiatives in many countries, such as whistleblowing hotlines and federations taking an initiative to prevent match fixing. So yes, the industry, the operators, the regulators, everybody should move towards that direction, because match fixing gives a bad name to our product, and it makes us look bad to our customer.
I have one final question from someone from the audience, and it is a very short question, basically. We mentioned how long it takes for B2Cs to obtain the license. There's mention of B2Bs. So can you explain to us if B2Bs require a license, first of all, in Greece? And if so, if there is a time frame for this license to be obtained?
There's a registry for the B2Bs that they have to register, and there will be a process of submitting some kind of a due diligence like process. They will not get a B2B license, but they need to enter this register and be approved. And there is a process that they call suitability, and they need to the B2Bs need to go through this process to show that the UBOs and the directors of the B2Bs are suitable to operate in Greece. Also, although there is no B2B license that is handed out, there is a 12-month window in which all games, for example, the casino games, the virtuals, that are offered by the Greek operators, these games have to be certified for the Greek regulations. And of course, the B2Bs have to be in this registry of the regulator and be approved as B2Bs. But they will not hold a license, specific license for that, as it is done in Romania, let's say.
Thank you very much. With this, we close our session. Thank you, Panagiotis. Thank you, Vasileios, and thank you very much, Yanica, for your contributions. And thank you, Zoltan, for the opportunity.
Thank you, Joe. Thank you, everyone, for joining this panel. It was something that we must done, because it was very important to have this this information about Greece and Malta at the conference. So thank you, everyone, for joining us in these 3 days, and we look forward to seeing you soon at our upcoming virtual, hybrid, or other type of events, and wishing you all a great day ahead. Bye.